USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Edge for Friday, December 9th, 2022. Each week we handicap and prognosticate some top games of the weekend. This podcast is sponsored by DCU Digital Federal Credit Union. What will DCU mean to you? Find out today by visiting dcu.org. Membership required. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. Dan Rubin is away this week. Jim, we've got 5 great games, and some of these lines actually surprised me a little bit on how close they are. But let's start out with the first one on the list. Number 6, Michigan, which comes off a split with Wisconsin. At number 12, Michigan State, which had a rough weekend getting swept last weekend by Minnesota.
Yeah, well, I'll start out by saying this is kind of college hockey's rivalry week, if you can say that exists. I'm not sure it does. We're going to break down 2 kind of real rivalries in college hockey, the first 2 games, and this is one of them, Michigan State. And I think that the bookmakers have probably undervalued Michigan here a little bit. A minus 145. I would have thought they'd be somewhere around minus 180. I know that they're going on the road. They're playing Michigan State, but Michigan State just comes off a sweep. Maybe they're trying to put that into the line. The effects of just wanting to get back and getting a win. I don't know. I just look at this one. I'm saying Michigan at 145 might be one of the best values all year. And then you go to the over-under of 6.5. I'm not sure on that. That's maybe a little less. That's a little bit more problematic for me to bet that one. But I look at Michigan and I'm saying, boy, that's a good price. I would expect them around 185, maybe even minus 200. But Michigan State at home suddenly somehow becomes a target. I don't know how much they take into effect home road in this rivalry, but it is a game that has been skewed a little bit in my mind.
You talk about the over-under, and we see some pretty high ones in the games we're looking at this week. I saw a discussion yesterday about the National Hockey League being really up there in scoring, and it seems like college hockey is too. 24 teams with 3 goals or more per game seems a little high in recent trends. And so when you see 6.5 and you see the kind of goals both these teams have put up, maybe that's not so bad. Maybe this is one to take the over.
I mean, all 4 of these games, I could honestly take the over on. I'm sorry, all 5 that we're going to preview. So I'll start there. The North Dakota, Western Michigan game, we're going to get to that. That's a 7 line. That's a little tougher. But you go back to Wednesday night in the NHL, you had Buffalo score 6 in the first period. You had Edmonton score 9. Scoring is up for some reason across hockey, and it's not just college hockey. We saw it obviously in the NHL last night. I don't know how to handicap the over-under as much anymore because you know that there's going to be games that goaltenders stand out. There are some good goaltenders that are going to play. I look at the next game, BCBU. That's a goaltender series. But at the same time, you just never know when an offense catches a little bit of fire. And I think these systems, I think the speed through the neutral zone and the ability to create offense off the rush is certainly putting us in positions where we're seeing more goals scored this year than we have in years past. So, an over-under of 6, an over-under of 5.5, I don't even think I have to look at the teams involved. I'm automatically taking the over. 6.5, 7, 7.5, those start to make me think. And we're going to have a couple of those in here this week. But it's kind of crazy where we're going with the over-under.
You mentioned goaltending. Dylan St. Cyr has been terrific so far this season for Michigan State. Michigan, not so much in the goaltending department. A little bit of a tandem. Eric Portillo had some illness. Maybe hasn't been up to his own level. Do you see a goaltending advantage there for the Spartans?
I don't know. Listen, Portillo is fantastic when he's healthy. Dylan St. Cyr has been relatively consistent when he's playing his best. So you could see a low-scoring game here. I just don't think with these 2 offenses, the way they've been this year, Michigan really can score goals. That's the one thing that really stands out to me about them is they can put pucks in the net. And I know you can have a great netminder. Maybe that is what comes out, that prevails. I just think that you have to know that you have good goaltending, But I think you have to know that you have really darn good offense between these two teams as well.
What about the intangibles? Michigan State licking its wounds after getting swept at home last weekend. Michigan starting to maybe feel a little more desperate in the Big Ten standings.
I feel like if you're Michigan, you have to feel desperate. You're coming off a split with Wisconsin. You didn't want that, and now you're coming into a point where you have to start sweeping some of these series. They haven't swept a ton when you really look at Michigan's schedule. Then Michigan State, you got swept at home. Now you're a home and home against Michigan. You've got to find a way to start getting points. When you're on home ice, especially, you have to get some of these points. They had been doing really, really, really well at home. I think going back, their last loss was way back in mid-October against UMass Lowell at home. So in the Big Ten, they have been fantastic going into last week, and they get swept. And it wasn't, I don't want to say that they were blow away games. I know the 6-3 game wasn't as bad as it seemed. A 5-0, 6-3 loss. You've got to find ways to get back in. If you want to be considered legit, top of the Big Ten, you're going to have to find ways to beat these teams. This becomes one of those series of desperation, I think, for Michigan State as well.
Well, there's a similar matchup back east where Boston University takes on Boston College. Boston University ranked at number 7, BC unranked, and it's kind of hard to decipher the standings in Hockey East. We talked about this in our Monday weekend review podcast, where you've got teams with as many as 13 games played and some as few as 8. But BC and BU pretty close together in the middle of the pack in the standings, both with first-year head coaches, both trying to regain some of their lost luster from the past few years.
And I'll tell you, I think that Boston University right now is playing their best hockey. I want to take out, there's a loss to the National Team Development Program, which was an exhibition game where I know Jay Pandolfo really just threw a bunch of lines together, was not looking at that as a game to win, was looking at it as a game to try things out. I think that that's admirable. So you go back before that, they are 7-1 in games before that. Their only loss to Northeastern. They just come off a weekend sweep of New Hampshire. They beat Notre Dame in there. They swept they beat Northeastern once. They swept UMass. They've done some really good things of late. Boston College has struggled a little bit more. This will be a big night at Boston College. It is going to be Jerry York night. They're going to honor their longtime head coach, Jerry York, who retired this offseason. So this is a big night. There will be a lot of emotion, I'm sure, for the players, even the coaches. You got to think of Greg Brown, their head coach, was with Jerry for a long time as an associate head coach. There will be a ton of emotion in that game. So I don't know the intangible that the sports books can put on emotion. This should be a game that BU is heavily favored, and they are -165. But could this have gone up to like a -225 and BC at a +185 instead of 135? Yes, there's no doubt. I think that the emotion has to factor somewhere in there, and you wouldn't be surprised if BC, just wanting to win one for their old coach, wanting to play their best game possible with Jerry York in the building. He hasn't really been there since retiring. So this is one of those nights that you have to look at and put the emotional factor in the line.
Over under is 6 in this one. You talked before about that's one to take. A 4-2 game seems pretty average these days. So, do we see a 5-2, a 4-3 out of this one?
I don't mind a 4-2 because that's a push, and like throwing that into I wouldn't throw it into parlays. I'd bet that alone so you don't ruin a parlay with it. But 6 is probably going to get there. Does 7 get there? That's the question. Can you get to 5-2? You do have, some good goaltending. You have some good defenses here. So maybe it could stay low. I just look at both these teams. They've been playing some moderate games. BC has had a couple of really low scoring games of late, but BU, they can put the puck in the net. They have a lot of guys who can score. So if BU gets the upper hand in this game, I wouldn't be surprised to see a 5-2, 6-2, 6-3 type of game. BC, if they're the winners, maybe they're coming out in a 3-2 win, or maybe even a 3-1 or a 2-1 win. Who knows? That's how kind of up and down they've been, but they just had 2 really low scoring games against Providence last weekend. So it's a tough call. If I had taken over under on this, I'd take the over.
When you look at goaltending, it seems to me that Boston University has the advantage in that department. no matter who's going to be in net?
Yeah, they should. I mean, Drew Commesso is fantastic. Vinny Duplessis, when he's been thrown in, has been more than admirable. I mean, you're talking about an Olympic goaltender, right? Drew Commesso. And then Duplessis, we saw him last weekend, got thrown in because Commesso was ill, played very well. I don't know. Like, I think you're right. I think that no matter who the goaltender is, I don't love Duplessis' numbers going into last weekend, but coming out of last weekend, it looks a lot better. Small sample size. I think he's admirable. Like, he does his job. He does a really good job. He clears the puck out. He makes the big saves. He has good defense in front of him. I would rather Drew Commesso in the net every night. If you give me the option between a goaltender who's pretty good or a goaltender who's an Olympic goaltender, I'm taking the Olympic guy every day.
And this is not to take anything away from Mitch Benson, who's been a little above average in net for the Eagles. And he has played just about all the time in net for Boston College.
Yeah, transfer product, but that's where BC has gone the last couple of years, relying on the transfers. And Benson's been good. When I've seen him, a couple of games I've seen him, he's been fantastic, and he's made the stops he has to make. And I'll tell you, as a coach, that's all you ask of a goaltender. Maybe you ask a little bit more. Give me the 9-12 save percentage, and we'll find a way to go up from there. We'll find a way to play better in front of you. That's usually the team's responsibility. If you can play pretty well as a goaltender, just get it going up from there. If you give me a 9-12, 9-20 save percentage somewhere in there, anywhere between 905 and 925, fantastic goaltending. We'll take it. We'll take the team from there.
Well, we've got 3 more games to look at, 2 in the NCHC and another Big Ten contest when we continue. USCHO Edge is sponsored by DCU Digital Federal Credit Union. Visit dcu.org.
Know how people say life happens? Well, for me, life was happening, and I needed a new truck. I didn't have time to shop around for a good loan, so I got one from the dealer, higher interest and all. Month after month, those payments were squeezing me. So I went to DCU. They refinanced my loan and helped lower my rate, which lowered my payments. These days, I have more money in my pocket for whatever life throws at me. What will DCU mean to you? Insured by NCUA. Membership required. Visit dcu.org.
We're back with USCHO Edge. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. North Dakota at Western Michigan. These are 2 teams that seem to be underperforming a little bit. Over-under is 7. North Dakota is a plus 100. Western Michigan is a minus 130. This one's very close, isn't it? Maybe just that's like the field goal home advantage in football.
Maybe. I'm trying to figure out how anybody is handicapping North Dakota right now. Western has had some really good games. You think about the fact that they won that game down in Nashville against Northeastern. They beat Duluth or split with Duluth before that. They split with St. Cloud before that, swept Miami. They've had some good weekends. I don't know that they have had the consistency that Pat Ferschweiler wants. And then last weekend was a really rough weekend, a 7-6 loss on the first night in what was just a wild back and forth game. And then a 3-1 loss the second night. You think, okay, you just got kind of hit by Omaha on the road and you're going to come back with a better effort the second night and Omaha still beats you. That is probably the only reason that I think this line is bet down as low as it is. North Dakota has not been solid of late. North Dakota is really struggling. This is a team that we have high expectations for every year. And when I look, 2 losses at Denver, a split with Miami, a split with Bemidji, they got a tie to win at Bemidji, and then 2 losses to St. Cloud. Some forgivable games in there. Listen, Denver's tough, St. Cloud's tough. But if you want to be one of the better teams in college hockey, you've got to find a way to win these games. Now they're going on the road. And playing at Lawson is not an easy place to go. We know that. We've talked about that many times. I think this is one of those series that really Western could get a little bit more in terms of their line. If they were a 165, I'd probably bet them. A 130, I love betting them. But you just never know with North Dakota. The way that they sometimes can just show up, who knows? The one thing, over under 7 scares the heck out of me. I wouldn't touch it. That is one of those numbers that it's just I love 5.5. I love 6. 6.5 makes me nervous. 7, I get panic on 7. It's hard to put up 8 goals because 7's a push. So you if you're betting a push, you're hoping for a 5-3 game. You're hoping for a 6-1 game, a 5-2, a 7-0, whatever, or higher. Those are rare games to see.
Some numbers for North Dakota that may help you on considering that. They've given up 6 goals 4 times this season already. The combined goaltending save percentage is .863. They're averaging close to 3.7 goals against in a game. North Dakota is 4-6 when leading after 1 period. Those are some scary numbers that make you really wonder about the Fighting Hawks this season.
Those are tough goaltending numbers, and there's no doubt that's not what North Dakota is usually typically built on as a program. I mean, they can score goals, we know that, but they usually have a pretty good back end. Their defense, their goaltending is low in what they allow. So those are concerning numbers, surprising numbers, certainly. So I still don't love 7 as a number. It's going to be hard to convince me that they're going to give up 6 again this weekend, but they could.
Let's go to our next game. It's number 5, Penn State at number 19, Notre Dame. Penn State minus 105, Notre Dame minus 125 with an over-under of 5.5. Pretty close matchup there. I'm a little surprised it's as close as it is, given what Penn State's been doing this year.
I love these two teams. I know that Notre Dame has underperformed, but this might be my favorite matchup of the weekend. Penn State, good team. This is a really good team. We know how solid they are. They're technically an underdog, minus 105 underdog. 2 favorites here, really, a minus 125 and a minus 105. I would have loved to have seen this more as a split, a minus 110, a minus 115 each, pick 'em type of thing. I don't mind either team here. If you whichever team you really favor here, Notre Dame at home or Penn State in general. I mean, Penn State on the road I don't think is different than Penn State at home. Notre Dame at home can be good if they get out to a lead. They have to play from ahead. Notre Dame does not chase the game well. Over under 5.5. Love the over in this. I think that you're gonna see a few goals here. I could be totally wrong in that one. It could be a 2-1 game, but I feel like you cannot throw Penn State into any game and expect the over-under to stay below 6. So I love the 5.5 over here.
Notre Dame coach Jeff Jackson talked about how his team needs to figure out how to score. Maybe that's something they've been working on. They've had 2 weeks to prepare for this as they were off last weekend.
And if that's where it kind of gets me, this over under. Like, you have to think that Penn State's going to score. They score every game. So if you think that Penn State's going to score and you're still making Notre Dame a favorite, then you have to think that Notre Dame's going to score. I guess that's where my whole confusion comes in. I think that I understand that the bookmakers may see Notre Dame as a team that doesn't put up a lot of goals, and they don't. So maybe 3 or 2 is a good number for them. But then why wouldn't you make them the favorite? Because you have to believe that Penn State's going to put up 3. They do on average, so this game confuses me a little bit in the way the line is written versus the over under. I can understand Penn State being an underdog against Notre Dame if you have the over under at 7. But over under at 5.5, I'd be hammering the over on this one.
We've got one more on the list, and that's number 1, Denver. They're minus 175 at plus 140, Minnesota Duluth. The over under on that one is 5.5. This has not been a great season for Minnesota Duluth. Meanwhile, the number 1 Pioneers faltered a little bit very early on. It was so long ago when they got swept at the hands of UMass, a team which in itself has struggled a little bit at times this season. But Denver seems to have gotten its act together, and Minnesota Duluth certainly wants to turn things around for the rest of their season, beginning at home.
Yeah, big time for Denver. I love the way they're playing. 10-2 since that sweep against UMass. They found ways to win last weekend. I know we talked about it on our Monday podcast, and I understand that the first game of that series was a little controversial, the way Denver beat Arizona State. But listen, this is a really good Pioneers team. They find ways to win games. Duluth, they have to straighten things out. I don't know exactly where the falters are. I know they've had a few injuries that doesn't help. But at the same time, they've just got to find a way. You're at home. This could be that one of those weekends that you turn it around. I like the value on Duluth at plus 140. They're a good team. We know that. I mean, any team that's coached by Scott Sandlin gets wins. So I'd love to find a way to pick them, but against a Denver team is a tough pick. I don't love the over/under of 5.5. I have this weird feeling that you're going to see Duluth struggle to score. Denver does not score a ton of goals. When they explode, they explode. It's usually at home. So I could see this being a 3-1 game, a 2-1 game, a 1-0 game. This is a kind of a weird series that I don't think that the goals are going to come easily. So as much as I say always hammer the over 5.5, go the over, I don't like this one.
Well, Jim, I got a general question. I was actually watching a Twitter spat last night between a hockey writer, kind of an old crusty guy, and a younger guy who was talking about how the Buffalo Sabres really exceeded the expected goals yesterday. I don't think anybody expected to see a half a dozen goals in the first period against Columbus. But that really brought to mind how the NHL, there's a lot more in the way of analytics there. Expected goals, various things like that certainly must help out the NHL odds makers. But in the college game, we don't see those numbers as readily. Is that something that makes it difficult for the bookmakers with college games?
I will admit that I don't fully get into the NHL analytics as much as a lot of people do. So I have a kind of cursory knowledge of what's going on. I don't look at them when I'm looking at NHL lines. I do bet more NHL hockey than I do bet college. I really don't touch college just because I work in it. I don't think it's really that appropriate. I can talk about it all day, but I try to stay away from it. But I do think that you're right, Ed, that there's a lot more data easily available. Could the bookmakers create their own data, get into some of these games? There are companies that can help you with products that can take video, review it, and automatically generate some of those stats. That exists out there. There's a lot of good technology out there right now. But I think for bookmakers, that would be more hours than they want to spend. I think bookmakers understand that what they have to do is find edges, and they're difficult to find. But if you can put somebody dedicated onto college hockey, there's only, basically 62-ish teams that you're going to see in a year. You're not going to have to worry about a ton of opponents. You don't always have to set a line in the game if you don't want to. So you can do a lot more educated edge setting if you are a bookmaker. And I think they do that very well. As the season goes on and as we get closer to a national tournament, I think they have to pay more attention, because then the fans are actually paying more attention. You're going to get more activity in Vegas. You're going to get more activity around an NCAA regionals. You'll have fans and really hardcore bettors that will find a way to bet some of these games. The sharks that go into casinos and know how to, how to find the edge, how to find lines, how to find areas that maybe a book overlooks. So I think the books have to take it a little bit more seriously as the season goes along. You have to be careful. Those white whales that everybody loves that can maybe drop $100,000 at a time. Listen, they sometimes win $300,000 at a time because a sports book might not be paying enough attention. It might have a line just set off enough that they can make a lot of money.
And of course, those expected goals, those are based on kind of the average of the season. And when you see situations like that Buffalo Columbus game on Wednesday night, you see a goaltending performance that's way below what was expected. So those are the things that come into it. I guess if you average out over the course of a season and you're on the right side of things, you do well, but you may not do so well week to week.
Yeah, and I don't think that sports books like to average out over the season. They like to see that. I know that they have to work that way, but they also like to take an early edge. They like to get profit up. then they might give a little bit back. But at the end of the season, they still have an edge. They have a margin they have to make, and they understand that very well. So whoever is the head of whatever it is, edge, responsibility, game, line setting, whatever it is, they all have different names. Some have security somewhere in their title too. But these people that have to find a way to set a line that's responsible and is profitable for the casino, it's a lot of pressure. I'd love to do it myself, but I also think that the pressure that comes along with it can keep you up at night.
Well, with that, let's wrap up this edition of USCHO Edge, which has been sponsored by DCU Digital Federal Credit Union. Visit dcu.org and find our podcasts at uscho.com/podcasts or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and this has been USCHO Edge.